I am Kiran Khan with Ishmael Mahmood, doing an interview on behalf of the TiffinWalli South Asian Heritage Food Project. The date is the 19th of March 2022 and the time is 1:30. Hi!
Hello.
How are you?
Very well.
So today I'm just going to ask you a few questions. It's mainly about your heritage and food in relation to that.
Mm-hmm.
So my first question for you is, were you born here?
Yes, I was born here.
Where is here? Sorry.
Here. Okay. I was born in East London, so Waltham Forest. Yeah, that's where I was born.
And were your parents born here?
No. So my father was born in Pakistan, in the Punjab, and he came over when he was 2 years old to this country. And my mother, she was born in Pakistan, obviously, and she came over when she was 17, and she married my father in a very arranged marriage, as you want to call it, arranged by parents. And she came over to this country, and they've been living here ever since. And I was born as a byproduct of that.
So did they move to Newham when they first came here?
No, they always lived in Waltham Forest. Okay. I live in Newham, so I've been living in Newham for like the last 5-6 years. So we kind of live on the cusp of all of the boroughs. So you've got Waltham Forest on one side and Newham on the other. It's just literally like you cross the road and you're in Newham. When you cross the road, you're in Leytonstone. So we're kind of affiliated with everything that happens in basically all of the boroughs all around the surrounding area where my parents live. So.
Okay. So growing up in your household, who was the main family cook? So,
good question. It was actually, when I was growing up, it was my grandma, who was my dad's mother, and she was the main cook, and I think she was quite the matriarch. Well, I always saw her as the matriarch. She would be like the head of the kitchen, head chef, and if my mum wanted to cook, she was more of an assistant rather than a main chef. Probably a little bit judged upon assistant as well. So she was the main person, and then I think after her passing, my mom took the reins and then became the kind of head chef. So she passed away in 2001, and then my mother was more kind of assumed the head of kitchen position and began cooking more and more and more. And I think that's when I actually first tasted my mom's food and realised how wonderful it was. From after she passed away and then following after that as well.
Do you remember what sort of things your mum used to cook?
Well, she does cook, so she currently still cooks, which is good. So what does she cook? She cooks a variety of different things, really, from your kind of traditional Pakistani dishes, and she kind of experiments with a lot of things as well. I think her experimentation started just over a decade ago. I think she was very traditionally Pakistani. I think living in a very hybrid environment and a very multicultural environment, she picked up a lot of different cuisines from around the world and began experimenting with them. So she cooks everything from Pakistani cuisine to Indian to Turkish to Lebanese to Moroccan, whatever she fancies.
Does that mimic the way your grandmother used to cook, or is it different?
I think it's different. So I've also lived in Pakistan for quite some time. I think I was there. I went to school there for a bit. So I actually tasted her mother's food. She wasn't around, she was in London. So I was living in Pakistan with my older sister, and her mother used to cook, and it was fairly similar, but the style of cooking was totally different because I grew up in the same house that I lived in the same house that my mother grew up in. So it was a very kind of, it wasn't the nicest house. It was quite poor, quite poor neighborhood of Pakistan in Punjab. And I got to try out my nan's cooking, and it was fairly similar. But I think my mom definitely experiments more living in London and being affected by everything that's around her and globalization and all that stuff. So.
What was your favourite thing to eat in Pakistan?
Good question. I think basically, right, my nan, she used to have something called a tandoor, but it used to be on the roof of the house, and it was built with clay, and then she would treat the clay before the summer started, so that she was able to cook chapatis in it.
What does that entail?
You're asking the wrong person. I'm not sure what it entails, but like I remember carrying crates for her. So like we would have to go to like to some farm and pick up like big crates and just wood, and then she would burn that wood, and then she would go up just before sunset, and then she would like take atta with her, which is dough, and then she would make the dough, knead the dough, and then stick it into the tandoor, which was like a big pit, a big square pit. Stick it in there, and then let these beautiful rotis cook, and they were crunchy yet soft at the same time. And I still remember that, and it was really nice. And then my granddad used to bring mangoes, which everyone knows. Asian mangoes are like pretty up there, the best. So I used to wait until he brought mangoes home so that we could have it with the rotis that she used to make. Even though there was like other food available, I would rather eat like mangoes and the roti that she used to make.
Did
nice.
You ever have a go at making rotis yourself?
No. I think it's too dangerous. I think she thought I would have burnt myself. I wasn't that old. I was like, what, year 4? I was in year 4 then?
That's like 8.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, she wouldn't trust me to do any of that. So yeah.
What about now? Do you cook much now?
Yes, I do cook. So I went to study abroad in Australia for a bit, and I didn't know how to cook at all. My mum was really worried because she thought, what are you going to eat? And we eat a lot of halal food, halal meat. So where I was in Brisbane, getting that kind of food was really, really difficult. It's not like London. So she taught me how to cook, and she taught me a few dishes, but she actually taught me like the principle of how to make like a good sauce, and then everything just goes into it, and then you're sorted. So yeah.
Go on. So when you were in Australia, you said you struggled to have access to halal meat.
Yeah.
Did that change your diet at all?
Not really. It changed my endeavour to go find it. And I tried all sorts of ways to try to find halal meat, and I kind of find one shop in Brisbane, which I would travel to, and it would take me about 2 hours to get there. And I would go stock up, bring it back, and that was me for the week or for 2 weeks. So yeah.
What's that like? I mean, you're used to London and Newham, Leytonstone. What's the difference between the two? Is Asian food easily available, halal food available here?
I think so, yeah. I think much more than probably ever before. So when my dad was growing up, I think he struggled with finding like halal meat and halal food growing up in the 70s. And then I think in the 90s, obviously, it's widely available. So I kind of grew up in like multicultural Newham and Waltham Forest, and it's everywhere, right? So you can get it from anywhere. And I think it's because of all the communities that have come here. So you've got like the African community, you've got Asian communities, Caribbean community that have all come here and kind of resided in London and found themselves in London in this kind of hodgepodge of like community and multiculturalism, and therefore you find anything and everything. I think it's the best part of living in London as well, the ability to like go from one area where you're like, oh, this is like great Turkish food, and then you go to another area and it's just like full of Lebanese people, and then you go to like Edmonton and there's the Somali community, a massive Somali community. So yeah, I think that's what makes London great as well as Newham, which is kind of a microcosm of what London is. So, yeah.
That's a nice way of putting it. I like that. When you were at school, then did you have a problem with food, or was it also available for you to have halal meat?
I don't think it was actually. I remember when I was at school dinners, there wasn't a halal option.
Yeah. When was that? If you don't mind me asking.
The 90s.
90s.
Yes, I grew up in the 90s. So yeah, there wasn't any halal food actually for school dinners. I remember our parents used to pack lunches as well. So, but that used to be sandwiches and stuff. So there wasn't really the availability of halal food. But then it was like chips and stuff, wasn't it? It was before Jamie Oliver came and like and went a bit crazy and said everyone needs to eat healthy food. Yeah. I remember getting like brownies for lunch. Yeah, not good.
Did that ever mean that you experimented like vegetarian food when you were outside?
Yes, I've had vegetarian food. I mean, even when I'm traveling, if I go like on a holiday or something and I go to a country where halal food is not available, then it's normally vegetarian food or fish. So fish is always halal because it just is. I don't know why, but it is. So yeah. So,
Scales?
I guess so. So having fish and vegetables, yeah. So, and I still cook a lot of vegetables. I enjoy my vegetables. So yeah. So I'm not a strictly meat person. So yeah.
So in your family household, are you the main cook?
Yes, so my family household. So it's me, my wife, and my little one, who's 17 months.
Oh, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Oh, it's, 17 months. Feels like 17 years. But yeah, so I like to think I'm the main cook, and my wife is my assistant. So she does all the onion cutting, and the peeling of garlic, and the cutting of ginger. And I am the person who dictates how much and what the amounts should be. But my mum taught me never to, so when you read, like, okay, say you want to get a recipe, right, and you go on the internet and you see, like, I want to cook this recipe, and it's got, like, use, like, 1 tablespoon of this and 1 teaspoon of that. My mum always taught me to, like, just put it in and just see what happens. So I think that's what I do now. Just get some salt, put it in, wait for my ancestral spirits to whisper in my ear, and yeah.
Has it ever not worked out for you?
Yeah, it hasn't. It has not worked out, but I guess that's the learning curve, isn't it? And then you take it from there, and then you kind of have some recipes in your head. I think you come to a point especially with Asian cooking, that you kind of know what to do. You don't really need to follow anything, and I think that's the position where, like, my mum was taught like that. So they didn't sit down and, like, write this recipe down and here's a book. It was pretty much taught, like, verbally, orally, which is a lot of things from India, Pakistan, and that part of the world. A lot of history and a lot of things that are taught orally, and no one writes anything down. So yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. What's your favourite dish to eat?
It's a difficult question. Very difficult question. I like everything and anything. Anything new. Depends how I feel on the day, really. I'm a big fish fan, actually. So I do like a lot of fish and lots of different types of fish. I think there's times where I wake up in the morning on the weekend, I'm like, right, I want to go and buy some fish, cook for the day, and that's going to be me. So yeah, that's what I do. So.
Interesting. And is there anything that, like, a particular food you remember from your childhood that you always, like, associate with your childhood or growing up?
That's a good question.
Thanks.
Not necessarily. I think anything and every. This is the thing, I don't really have a favourite dish, and it was just more like, so if it was like my mom's biryani, that would be really nice. If it was any chicken dishes, that was really, really good as well. Yeah. I don't really have a favourite dish. I don't remember anything. I remember everything. So it's not just like something specific. So.
Do you think there's, like, I know you mentioned, like, with the tandoori, reminds you of your grandma. Is there anything that, like, reminds you of, like, your childhood that your mum used to always make? Or your grandma, sorry.
Not really. It's just everything that she makes, really. So no, nothing reminds me of. Not specifically. Probably the best answer to your question.
So I know you said your grandmother used to cook when you were growing up.
Yeah.
Was it mainly South Asian food?
Yeah, mainly South Asian food. Yeah, but she used to do a lot of stuff. Like, she used to, like, make pickles in the garden, and, like, I remember she used to make this soup which was made out of, like, almonds. Yeah, it's this almond soup that she used to make. I remember having that and liking it. She used to make all sorts of interesting things that I probably wouldn't cook anymore, like stomach, like lamb stomach. Yeah, probably not. And in Pakistan, it's quite a delicacy to have, like, lamb brain, stomach, kidneys, liver. I started to steer away from it all. I don't know, just something that I just can't. I don't have the right stomach for, I think.
Given that your grandmother used to cook you a lot of Asian food, when you ate outside of your house, was there any sort of strange English customs that you weren't used to?
Interesting. When I was growing up,
Thank you.
I used to assume that all white people used to eat chips.
Right.
And that was, like, the culinary diet for anyone who's white in England. But I also thought, where is all the white people? Like, generally, like, you know, when you're growing up in, like, Wolverhampton Forest and, like, Newham and Hackney and, like, Redbridge, all of these areas, right? All you kind of grow up seeing is, like, Asian people, black people, and you're like, do white people even live here? Like, and honestly, I thought the whole of the UK was that. It was all this multiculturalism, and I thought, oh, what a great country to live in. And then, like, you go out a little bit out of London, suddenly you're like, oh, okay, right, I do kind of stick out a little bit. And then you work a bit more, you're like, right, okay, I need to go back to London. So I think from that view, I used to think going back to your question, white people just eat chips, and if we're having chips and fish specifically, then that's a white people custom, the white people thing to have. But then when I was growing up, right, there was like loads of chicken shops that were popping up, like fried chicken shops all across the borough. So I think a lot of people would associate that with some sort of hybrid version of like white people food or British food, with like I don't know, some sort of maybe African twist or something, and then Asian people started putting the spices in all of this chicken and they start selling it. It's just mass food produced for mass consumption. I think it moved from like this fish and chip eating British culture to this kind of chicken and chips eating culture, which might have been borrowed from like the States. But that's what we grew up like kind of getting from outside. And like if you wanted like a quick meal after playing football with your friends, like after school, and you would pay like £1 for like a few wings and chips, and that was the food that you would eat. And you would kind of think, oh, maybe this is the cultural food of this country, and this is what I'm eating. So
What do you think the cultural food of this country is now?
it's chicken tikka masala.
Do you think that? But if back to what you were saying
That's
earlier.
what it is, which is really weird, right? Which is really weird, because it was invented in the UK, and I thought it was always Asian, right? But it wasn't.
Invented in Scotland.
Scotland, exactly. So I never order anything tikka masala anymore because it's not authentically Asian. So I'm going to order something that's not Asian.
When you were saying that when you moved outside of London or visited outside
Yeah.
of London, you felt like you were the only person of colour.
Yep.
Was that literally just because you could see, or was there anything different about like the community values in other parts of the country?
I think it's just generally what you can see, right, and what you can perceive. Also, you think like England is quite green, and you don't realise that living in London. You think it's just buildings and just loads of people everywhere and big shopping centres and stuff, but it's not. It's lots of greenery everywhere, and I think that's even a shock to the system as well. Just being like, oh, okay, so London is like a kind of a bubble in itself. So yeah, I experienced a lot of that going away. Whether that's related to food or not, is a question.
It's about your own personal history and journey, so it doesn't need to be directly related.
Yeah.
Would you ever move out of London?
Maybe, but I do think like I'll struggle finding like halal food. So I live in Newham right now. So I live on the cusp of Green Street, and literally I've got halal food, Asian food available on my doorstep.
Yeah.
Right? Like honestly, some days I come back from work, Deliveroo, and that's it, and you're getting like all the best food always available. And there's all these new places popping up, and you're always just trying them out. So it's great. I feel like if I move out of London, I'm just not gonna be able to have that. Then I'll be making trips here, and even like buying like specific things. I don't. You know how people stock up their house and then like have like meat, and then they have like all of these like spices. So I don't even do that. I just literally go to the shop down the road, and I can buy like my spices, and I can buy my like chili, and I can buy my meat, and I don't even need to worry. And I think that's the best part of living in Newham, like especially for people that I think minorities, people that are coming into the country for the first time. It's like a home away from home, I think, a little bit, because everything is available on your doorstep. You just don't know it yet because you haven't been out of London. When you go out of London, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, home was great.
It's interesting you say it's like a home away from home, given that you actually did live in Pakistan.
Yeah.
Like, how great would you say the difference is between your life in Newham versus your life in jail in Pakistan?
Well, I wasn't in Pakistan for a long period of time, but it was still substantial to have a massive effect on my life, I think, in terms of language. So your question was about, so repeat your question again?
So I was basically just asking, what do you think like the difference is? If you said Newham reminds you of a home away from home, is that similar to your experience in Pakistan?
So I think, right, I always struggled with this concept of home, because I don't think for a second generation person, or even the next generation living in this country, it's hard to associate where home actually is. You would think it would be like where your parents were from, but when you go there, you're always treated as like a little bit of an outsider and not an insider, and that comes from really nice treatment. Like they treat you really, really nicely, better than anyone else, and because of that, you feel a bit like, oh, I kind of want to be treated like everyone else, but you don't. But when you live in the UK, again, like the cultural associations that you have generally in day-to-day life, especially if you're working in offices or you've worked in London, you know that the predominant culture is the white culture. So you need to find yourself a home, somewhere where you belong, right? Because amidst not belonging where your parents were, not belonging even in like the UK as a whole, where do you belong? So I guess you find Newham and Waltham Forest and all these places a place of kind of belonging a little bit. Because you think, wait a minute, okay, the right shops are here, the right food is here, the right people are here. Like, I don't need to worry about racism specifically, which is definitely a worry if you go anywhere else. It becomes a little bit of a home. But is it really a home? And that's the question. Like, do second generation people, third generation people really have a home? I'm thinking about my son, and I'm trying to teach him like to speak Urdu as opposed to English, because I know he'll learn English. So I speak to him in Urdu, just to kind of allow him to have that heritage tongue. But he's going to be quite far removed from it, because I'm far removed from it. So he'll be far removed from it. Whether is he going to class England as his home or not? That's a different question. So your question about where is home, I don't know.
You said earlier that, you know, growing up in like Walthamstow, Leytonstone area, you surrounded primarily around Asian people and black people, not very many white people. Do you feel like there's, I guess, a shared sense of culture with yourself and black people who also grew up in the same area as you?
I think so. So most of my friends growing up, so I went to quite a school that was largely black and Afro-Caribbean really. Most of my friends were from Africa or the Caribbean, and that's who I grew up with. So yeah, I think there is some of my really good friends are from Somalia, so I went to their weddings and share their customs and share their rituals. So I think there is a bit of a mishmash of like cultures. But I think what brings everyone together is they're all in this country and they've all come from a similar background. It's either your parents were economic migrants, so they left their country to come here. You escaped war-torn countries as a refugee, and therefore you've arrived here. Everyone has a different story, however it's a common story, which is really weird. It's different, but yet common at the same time. And I think that's what really makes people stick together in these areas, because they all come from a very similar story. And that's the kind of thing that I experienced growing up as well.
So, because obviously you've been around black people pretty much your whole life, did you feel like, you know, when you'd go and visit your friends' houses, would you try their different foods? Yeah,
of course.
And was the whole problem of gaining halal food an issue for you?
Not really. So, if I went to obviously it's halal food associated with Muslims.
Yeah.
So if I go to friends' houses that weren't from the Muslim faith, because they lived in Newham, they're normally buying halal meat from the shop anyway, because that's the only thing that they sell. So yeah, it's never been a problem. No.
So given like that experience, have you bought using the example of Somalia? Have you ever bought any like Somalian food customs into your own South Asian cooking?
No, I should actually. I haven't. No.
Wow. After today, you might try that.
I might do. But I'm quite open to like trying out different ways of cooking and different styles of cooking. So
get it from your mum.
Sorry.
You get it from your mum.
Yeah. So yeah, I probably would.
Your family are obviously from Pakistan.
Yeah.
Did they ever bring over any food in luggages?
Oh, I think they still do. yeah, they still do. Normally like mithai, which is Asian sweet treats, which are overloaded with sugar, right, and butter, and they bring over those kind of stuff. They still do. My father-in-law goes to India because my wife is from India, and he brings over like this like milk-based kind of mithai, which is another sweet dish that he brings over.
Which one?
It's called kaju or something. I can't remember the full name of it. But because he's Gujarati, he called it something, and I'm not Gujarati, so I don't.
Is it like kheer?
No, it's not kheer. It's like blocks.
Like koya?
A bit like koya.
Okay.
A bit like koya. So it's made from koya. So
okay.
he brings that over, and he gives that to us. My dad loves getting like pine nuts from Pakistan. So my family send him over pine nuts. Pine nuts are really expensive, right? So real pine nuts in Pakistan, they normally grow in like KPK region of Pakistan, like the more towards like the Afghanistan border.
Yeah.
And they're really large, about this long. And they cost, how much do they cost? Like £50 a kilo or something. He always orders them because he loves them. And I sit down and we both sit down and we kind of peel these pine nuts and have these pine nuts that are from somewhere near the border of Afghanistan.
Have you ever
It is a
brought
good
any
thing.
food back with you?
Have I brought any food back from Pakistan? No, I haven't actually. Have I? No, not really. No.
You won't be allowed to now, I
Yeah,
don't think.
probably not. No. I mean, you can buy like sweets and stuff, but I guess you can't really buy like full-on food and bring that back.
What's your favourite thing that you can get back home that you can't get here?
I think it's the availability of like really, really good food. So they're cooking for a certain clientele, right? So their clientele is Pakistani people that demand a certain like quality of food. So everywhere you go, it's going to be better than the last place that you went to, and I think that's what I really love about it. You might try the same like chicken curry somewhere, but it might be different every single place that you try it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it so great. So yeah.
Given that you live right off of Green Street,
Yeah.
and you say that you have a lot of good food readily available to you, home food or outside food?
Home food, always home food.
Always home
Always
food.
home food.
Same question, but if you're in Pakistan?
Good question. I think a bit of both. I think outside food until you realise that your stomach is not built like theirs. And then home food, probably salads.
Nice. I like that. What sort of, I guess, what would you eat for breakfast? Do you eat, I guess, like continental breakfast?
What,
Do you eat,
over here?
Yeah.
In this country?
both?
I think I eat quite a Western breakfast. Like eggs and toast and cereals and stuff like that. So I don't do the whole like paratha and like ghee and yogurt. Actually, if it's Ramadan, then yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Ramadan's coming up soon.
Yeah, exactly. So then
Are
yes.
you going to be changing your eating habits for that, other than the obvious?
That is what I'm going to be doing, the obvious. That will be the change in my eating and drinking habits. But I think generally my eating habits will largely remain the same.
So, like, what would you eat for Sehri?
For Sehri, I would eat probably. So if I was when I was living with my mum's, I would have like a large paratha in the morning with some sort of like chicken or lentil curry or something like that. It's quite heavy, right? At that time, like 3:30,
very.
yeah. But you know you're going to be fasting for like a 17, 18-hour day now. But nowadays, I'll probably have something similar, but not probably homemade parathas. I might just get like the ones you can get from the shop and you can cook in like 30 seconds.
Shana paratha.
Yeah, exactly, because it's easier. And why are you going to go through the hassle? And plus, like, put that on mum. So yeah.
Cool. I think that is,
Great.
yeah, we're done.
Amazing.
Thank you very much. That was great.
Good.